Good evening, and welcome to the Dorothy Thompson lecture series on civil rights. Dorothy Thompson, the person for whom this series is named, was a marvelously warm and witty person, and she was sharp as a tack. She could spot more implications that were farther in the future and spot them quicker than anyone I knew. This lecture series, and she was committed to civil rights. She was the first, she was particularly committed, I'd say, to the First Amendment. And yet, committed to that First Amendment for free speech, she authored the first university policy on hate speech and limitations on our free speech, appropriate limitations. So this lecture series is a marvelously fitting memorial. This lecture series was created by the Office of the Provost at Kansas State University. And to introduce our speaker tonight, I bring you April Mason, Provost of Kansas State.
Well, I don't promise that wonderful radio voice that we just heard from, but it is indeed my pleasure to follow up Larry's introduction and be able to introduce our speaker, with whom I am so pleased to have had the opportunity to have dinner this evening. And I think we are definitely in for a treat. But let me start by backing up a little bit, as Dr. Weaver did. The Office of the Provost established the Civil Rights Lecture Series in 1994 in recognition of Dorothy L. Thompson's contribution to the field of human rights on campuses throughout the state of Kansas, as well as across our nation. Ms. Thompson was the director of the Office of Affirmative Action from 1972 until 1985, when she became the Associate University Attorney. Ms. Thompson served in that office until her untimely death in 1992. Both of those activities are huge positions on our campus. In both of those areas, she was a role model for women and for attorneys in Kansas. She was highly regarded by persons of all political leanings for her diplomacy, her judiciousness, and her effectiveness. Dorothy Thompson had an abiding respect for all people. She had a profound commitment to fairness and to equity. A civil rights lecture series is a particularly fitting honor, memorial, and tribute to Dorothy L. Thompson. And tonight, to commemorate the Dorothy L. Thompson Civil Rights Lecture, we are very fortunate to have Dr. Ali Khan. Tonight's speaker will touch on a topic that is in today's headlines: the civil rights of Muslim Americans in this country. For those who chose the topic and chose our speaker, I commend you. This is a very timely topic, as we have just last week launched the next common reading book for Kansas State University, which will be Zaytun, authored by Dave Eggers. The true story of a Muslim American living in New Orleans before, during, and after the Katrina hurricane. Dr. Khan will discuss the obstacles currently confronting American Muslims as they seek to freely practice their religion here in this country. Evidence of the obstacles that they deal with include lawsuits currently pending in federal court. He's also going to talk with us about the perception that Muslims threaten our national security and threaten other areas with the perceptions posed to the religious freedom and cultural identity of American Muslims. Dr. Khan was born in Pakistan and initially trained as a civil engineer in Lahore. He later switched to law, obtaining a law degree in Punjab University, Lahore. In 1976, Dr. Khan immigrated to the United States and studied law at New York University School of Law, where he received his LLM, Master of Law, and JSD, Doctor of Science of Law. Dr. Khan is a member of the New York Bar. He has authored numerous academic books published in prestigious series, Developments in International Law. And over the years, he's written numerous law review articles on the U.S. Constitution, comparative constitutional law, legal education, human rights, international disputes, and terrorism. His academic writings are used as part of course materials in universities across the world. And we have the opportunity to bring him only from Topeka, where he serves on the faculty at Washburn University in the College of Law. Dr. Khan has devoted much of his academic scholarship to Islamic law and conflicts involving Muslim communities. Dr. Khan has participated in Islamic law symposia held at the law schools of Samford University in Alabama, University of St. Thomas in Minnesota, Berry University in Florida, Michigan State University, and Brigham Young University. In these capacities, he's contributed groundbreaking articles on Islamic jurisprudence. In addition to law articles and academic books, Dr. Khan also writes for the popular press here in the United States, the Middle East, as well as the Indian subcontinent. His legal and foreign affairs commentaries are published worldwide, and international media seek his comments on world events. How incredibly fortunate we are to have him as a near neighbor and able to give his time this evening to talk with us. In the spring of 2007, Dr. Khan was a resident legal scholar with the Organization of Islamic Conference in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. He has taught at Washburn University School of Law since 1983. Would you join me in welcoming Dr. Ali Khan?
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you very much, Provost Mason and Professor Weaver. It's my great pleasure to be at K-State. This is my third trip here, and I thoroughly enjoy whenever I come to your great university. A lot of students from here go to Washburn University Law School. And in fact, currently, right now, one of my research assistants is a graduate of K-State. So we have a lot of admiration for your university. I also thank the members of the committee for inviting me to give this lecture. And I look forward very much to your questions, which I will try my best to answer. I would restrict my comments to maybe 30 or 35 minutes, and then I want to have a discussion with you, because I know you have questions and you're not sure what the answers are. And maybe I can help you, not completely, but somewhat, in answering those questions. In fact, I already have a question before I started. Somebody gave it to me. Now, the topic that is chosen for tonight is American Muslims and civil liberties, or the right to their religious freedom in the United States. I think, first of all, let's make clear, what do we mean by American Muslims? Who are these people who are American Muslims? We have two words joined together, which perhaps have never been joined before: American and Muslims. We have joined African Americans, we have joined Hispanic Americans, but this is a new coinage, American Muslims. We could also say Muslim Americans. Probably there might be some distinction between the two, but American Muslims has become a label to describe a group of people who both claim to be Americans as well as Muslims. Now, most of you know that Islam is one of the three Middle Eastern religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Each one of them has a divine text. The Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Quran. I call them God's trilogy, the three divine texts that have been given to humanity for the betterment of humanity. Each textbook, each divine text, each God's book builds upon the previous book and takes the ideas and puts them together and advances the message. So in that sense, Muslims are inextricably linked with Jews and Christians. You cannot separate them. And this is the context in which I want you to understand Muslims, that they are the third types of believers in the Middle Eastern religions. And these Middle Eastern religions have a lot of things in common. They all believe in one God. They all believe in the concept of prophecy. They all believe in the concept of sin. They all three believe in the life hereafter. And they all believe that we are accountable for what we do in our lives. So Islam is not a religion which you cannot understand. Islam is a religion that you can easily understand if you have background in Judaism and Christianity. And of course, most of you are Americans. Either you have been born in this country, or you, like me, have been naturalized as American citizens. Nevertheless, even though you can understand Islam and you can understand what it means to be an American, when you put these two things together, American Muslims, it still sounds unfamiliar. It still sounds new. It still sounds something that you want to understand. And I think my job tonight is to explain that and to then discuss whether American Muslims are enjoying their lives in this country, and then to what extent they are facing difficulty. Now, these are some of the images of American Muslims. I don't want you to think that American Muslims are a monolithic community. They're very diverse people coming from very different backgrounds. Muslims constitute about 25% of the world population. There are over 1 billion Muslims. 57 out of 194 nation states are predominantly Muslim. Muslims live in all parts of the world. They speak hundreds of different languages. They come in hundreds of different colors. They have hundreds of different cultures. And therefore, to say that Muslims are just one community would be descriptively inaccurate. These are some of the faces of American Muslims. We see Malcolm X right, over there, praying in Mecca, in one of the mosques over there. We have Keith Ellison crying recently in a congressional hearing, and he is a member of the House of Representatives. I've met him, he's from Minnesota. In the middle is Doctor from Arizona, and then there's Warisdin Muhammad right next to Malcolm X, and then there are unknown Muslims that I have put together. There are about 7 million, to one estimate, 7 million Muslims who live in the United States, in all 50 states. 3 million out of 7 are African Americans who have been in this country for centuries. Let me share with you that long before the Protestants came into existence, which was in the 17th century, the first people to come to Americas were Catholics and Muslims. Catholics came as masters, and Muslims came as slaves, picked up from the west coast of Africa. So Islam is not new to this land. It is older than the Protestant religion, which has become the dominant religion of the United States. And that's a very interesting twist of history. Starting from 60s, immigrants from Muslim countries were allowed to come to the United States. Before that, many people could not come to the United States because of racial barriers. So today we have 7 million, or maybe more, Muslims, some born in the United States, some immigrant like me, and then their children, like I have 2 sons who were born in the same hospital in Topeka, Kansas. And by all means, they are no less Americans than many of you are. They do not describe themselves as Pakistanis, as I do, because I spent a lot of years over there. So when you talk about American Muslims, you're talking about native-borns and immigrants. You're talking about men and women. You're talking about the elderly and children. You're talking about cab drivers. You're talking about lawyers and engineers. And you're talking about physicians. And you're talking about professors. And you're talking about construction workers. And you're talking about blacks. And you're talking about whites. And you're talking about Asians. And you're talking about Middle Easterns. And you're talking about Arabs. Extremely open community. When I go to the mosque in Topeka, Kansas, I must speak English, even though many of the people coming to the mosque are immigrants. Some are from Middle East, some are from Indonesia, some are from Iran, some are from Turkey. I don't speak their language, and they don't speak mine. So American Muslims is not a monolithic community. They are diverse as diversity could be. They are diverse racially, they are diverse linguistically, they are diverse culturally. They are diverse occupationally. They do different things, all the things that you can imagine. So then when we say American Muslims, we are constructing a group which cannot be put together because there's so much diversity within the group. So it must be an abstract concept, American Muslims. And I invite you to think that way, that this is a construct. This is something we have imagined, that there is something common among these 7 million people, even though they could, even within religion, they could be Shia or Sunni, they could be Sufi, they could be Nation of Islam, they could be Wahhabis, they could be conservative, they could be fundamentalists, they could be liberal, they could be Muslims only in name, they may never go to the mosque, all kinds. So I think my first suggestion to you is that all these people that you see, they're individuals. And we have chosen to call them a group, American Muslims. Two things are at stake for American Muslims: dignity of the individual and dignity of Islam as a religion. Look at these pictures. This is the toilet paper with the verses of the Quran on it. Now, as Muslims, we cannot do this because we believe in the divinity of the Hebrew Bible, and we believe in the divinity of New Testament. We don't have the luxury to get back to these people, even in our mean-spiritedness, because we are simply prohibited to do so. We would never burn a divine book. As I said, God's trilogy, we would never burn any of the 3 books. Even though, as Muslims, we do not agree each and everything that is said in the Hebrew Bible or in the New Testament. For example, the Hebrew Bible would say God made the universe in 6 days and rested on the 7th. We believe as Muslims God does not need rest. He's beyond fatigue. And therefore, he did not rest on the 7th day. He looked at the universe he has created on the 7th day. We do not believe, like the Christians do in the New Testament, that Jesus is the Son of God. We believe he's a prophet, but we also believe that God has no son, God has no father, God is not biological. And it is unfair, we believe, that God would only associate with one of his creatures, human beings, and leave out the others. So the Quran tells us that there is nothing that resembles God. Humanity or animals or anything, God is unique. So, even though we differ with the Jews and the Christians, we would never burn their divine books. We would never say that Islam is of the devil. We would never say that Islam's God is fake. Or we would never say that the Jewish God is fake. We would never say that the Christian God is fake. We would only say there's only one God. And it is the God of believers and unbelievers. Even if you don't believe him, he's your God. So, as Muslims, we have deep respect for the other 2 religions, but unfortunately, some of the Christians and some Jews do not respect the religion of Islam. And I think in the United States, one of the difficulties is that the dignity of Islam is always challenged. For example, many people believe that Islam is inherently violent, that Islam teaches violence. I have read scholarly pieces, I have read journalistic pieces, I have talked to people. I think there is a perception among many, open and hidden both, that there is something wrong with this religion, that its followers commit terrorism, violence. What is wrong with it? I want to clarify that point today. Islam does not believe in turning the other cheek, which is a Christian belief. Even though I think a long time ago, the concept of just war was introduced in Christian theology. And the concept of turning the other cheek was banished long time ago, centuries ago. Islam does not believe in turning the other cheek. Islam believes that if you are oppressed, you will have to fight. Violence is not completely prohibited in Islam. And therefore, Islam becomes a very unique, feisty religion. That on the one hand, it means peace. On the other hand, it says to the followers, fighting is better than accepting oppression. The words from the Quran. That if you have a choice as believers between fighting and submitting to oppression, then you should choose fighting. So I think we find that many Muslims are fighting. They're fighting in Afghanistan, they're fighting in Iraq, they were fighting in Bosnia, they were fighting in Kashmir, they're fighting in Palestine. So when you put all these things together, you find that these people are violent. And then happens 9/11. And I think many Americans who have never heard of Muslims or Islam started to believe that this is a religion of the devil. This is a religion that believes in violence. This is a religion where people kill innocent people. And I suggest to you that that is not a completely inaccurate impression of Islam. Islam does teach violence, but not gratuitous violence, not unjust violence. I think it says you have to fight under oppression. So, American Muslims feel that there are two problems that they face in this country. Number one, they are not accepted as individuals. And number two, their religion is not respected. A very fascinating insight to the American culture, and I want to share with you as an outsider. I've lived in the United States for the last 37 years, and before that, I lived in Pakistan. Here's what I want to share with you, and tell me in your questions if I'm wrong. There are two very dominant themes in the American culture. One is that American culture appreciates individualism. And our laws and our Constitution and civil liberties, they protect individualism. You as an individual have the right to vote. You as an individual has the right to an attorney if the state wants to prosecute you for a crime. You have, as an individual, the freedom to speak, even if the crowd doesn't like it. You have lots of freedoms as an individual. And I think I would say that the American culture protects the individual like no other culture does. That's one strain. The other strain is that American culture also treats certain people as groups and deny individuality to the members of that group. For example, African Americans suffered from that second strain. They were all treated the same. I think people refuse to treat African Americans as individuals. Similarly, I think there was a presumption with respect to Hispanics, and still is, that they're treated as a group, and they are refused to be seen as individuals. And I think same thing is happening with American Muslims. Despite the fact that I said there is so much diversity within the Islamic community, yet for many people, American Muslims constitute a group, and that group threatens the national security of this country. Now we have to sort it out, that why is it that as Americans, we believe in individualism, but we deny individualism to certain groups? Why is that? Why don't we say that certain individuals from any group, however you define it, will not be likable to you? Let me give you an example. Look at these people. Are these people individuals, or are they members of a group? I think some you recognize, some you don't. Perhaps some of you recognize all of them. We do not treat Timothy McVeigh, and I don't remember his guy's name in Arizona who shot at Representative Gifford. I'm sorry? Loeffner. Did we associate these killers with some group? But this is Faisal Shehzad, who tried to detonate a bomb in Times Square. This is Major Nidal, who killed 11 people in Texas. That is, I think she's called Jihadi Jane or Jane Jihadi, who tried to detonate a bomb. She's from Colorado. And that guy with beard is born in the United States, and now he's in Yemen trying to organize resistance against the United States. If I remove these two pictures from there, I think you would say these are American Muslims. And they are. All four of them either naturalized or born. Three were born. Faisal Shehzad was a naturalized citizen. Why don't we treat them as individuals? Why do we not say that these four people have done something wrong that we do not accept? But I think many people would be shocked and surprised that these American Muslims, they are sowing this new violence in this country. And therefore, we have to do something about American Muslims. Peter King, a representative from New York, a Roman Catholic, who was, in fact, very close to Muslims before 9/11. But after 9/11, he became a critic of Muslims. And now he wants to hold a hearing, and in fact, he did last Thursday, over the radicalization of American Muslims. Mr. King believes that 80% of mosques are centers of treason, that people are concocting, plans to hurt the United States, and he wants to investigate that. People have suggested to Peter King that why don't you treat American Muslims as a diverse group? How can you say that the doctors and the lawyers and the engineers and the babies and students and normal people who go in the morning and drop their kids at school and go to commute to work and then come home and look forward to a restful evening and go to bed, and it never crosses their mind that they have to plan something to hurt the country they live in? Let me also share with you that the people I see who are Muslims and who are Americans, they're very grateful that they live in this country. They truly are. Because they have good lives. They have good economic lives. I do. I'm very grateful to the state of Kansas. I have lived the best years of my life in Topeka. I have taught for the last 28 years, and many of the students, of course, have become, senior lawyers, some judges. I am very thankful what I have received from Kansas and from the United States. I would never think of hurting this country or the state of Kansas. Why would I? And I'm not alone. I think all the people I meet in the mosques or otherwise, or invite them into my house, they are extremely thankful. They're having good life. They also believe that the freedom of religion that is available in this country is not available back home. They would also say that to you, that if you want to practice your religion freely, this is the best country to do so, because there's a constitutionally protected right to exercise your freedom to religion. So do not think that American Muslims, are these devils who are trying to hurt the United States. They won't. Nobody hurts their own country. Only the pathological. I think in the next, if Timothy McVeigh or Loeffner wants to hurt, that's an exception. Most of you who are Americans, do you want to hurt this country? Do you want to hurt the state of Kansas? Do you want to hurt Manhattan? Why would you? You wouldn't. American Muslims are no different. They don't think any differently. So why is it that there is this dread, this fear of American Muslims? I suggest to you it is because we have declined to accept them as individuals. We are giving the same treatment to American Muslims, or want to give them the same treatment, as we have historically given to other groups. And the one group that comes to my mind is, of course, African Americans. I think we can stop, and we can change this strain of our culture. And we begin to treat individuals no matter what identity they have. Civil liberties. As I said, most Muslims who live in this country are very happy that they're having good life, their rights are protected. But after 9/11, things have changed. They're no longer trusted as much as they were before. There's a government policy to send spies to mosques. This would never happen. Government would never send spies to churches or to temples or synagogues. When I go to the mosque, I don't know who's the worshiper and who's the spy. I don't like it. I want to go to the mosque and worship without fear that a government official, either directly or through an agent, is watching me, listening to my conversation. This is a denial of civil liberty. But picture, as I said, is not bleak. For example, here is this hijab is freedom, not oppression. This is a slogan a woman, American Muslim, is waging. Now before, the common belief was that only oppressed women would wear hijab, a veil. But now we know that a lot of Muslim women, they want to wear a veil not out of oppression, but out of their choice. Nobody oppresses them to do so. They want to do it. Fortunately, that freedom is available in this country. It is not available in Turkey, which is 99% Islamic country. Now Turkey is also changing. But for 60, 70 years, Turkey prohibited women to wear Islamic veil, Islamic hijab. So a lot of Muslims, men and women living in the United States, they feel that 9/11 has taken away some of their liberties. But nevertheless, there are a lot of liberties that they have in this country which they do not have even in Muslim states. One more point, and then I'll open for discussion. The question is, can Islamic law come to the United States? I think that was the question handed to me before I started. Very simple answer to that. Islamic law cannot violate the laws of Kansas or the laws of the United States. Very simple. Only those laws of Islam which are compatible with state laws and federal laws will be protected and enforced. For example, somebody asked me that if there is a punishment of death for apostasy, which is disputed even within Islam, can that be enforced in the United States? The answer is no. But what Islamic law can be enforced in the United States? A couple of them. For example, if you want to leave your property according to Islamic law, there are ways to do it. You can will away your property according to Islamic law, which is different from the laws of Kansas. You can do so. If you want to subject your contracts to Islamic law, you can do so. If you want to get married according to Islamic law, that is available. So there are a lot of pieces of Islamic law which can be enforced and are being enforced in the United States. But Islamic criminal law cannot be enforced in the United States. I think with this comment, I open the audience for questions.
You all received little note cards when you came in on which to write questions. If you have questions or comments that you would like Dr. Khan to address, please hold these cards up, and the officials here will pick them up. And while they're doing that, let me just ask to
Yes.
start it off. Suppose that a contract entered into between two parties under Islamic law, who would enforce it if one of the parties felt that it had not been properly honored?
In fact, there are cases where an American company entered into a contract with a Saudi company. And in the contract, they agreed that if any dispute arises out of this contract, it will be resolved according to the Sharia.
And who would a court do that?
Yes. You see, what happened was that the Saudi company sued the American company in New York, Federal District Court. And the Saudi company said, we want to settle this case under New York law. But the American company said, no, you have agreed to subject this contract to Sharia. So now we want this contract to be resolved, dispute, to be resolved under Sharia law. And the judge said, yes, I agree with that.
I see. So the U.S. civil authorities would be the enforcers of the Sharia law?
In that contract, yes. Thank you very much. How much time do we have? And could you read it? I'm sorry, could you read it to me? I can't read it very much.
You want me to read it?
Yeah.
What characteristics from the U.S. liberal system influence Islam, turning it into a moderate or more liberal Islam? Do you want me to repeat that?
No, I think I got it. The question is, what can Islam learn from the United States? Nothing. Islam cannot learn anything from a country. Can Muslims learn? Sure. I think religions are above countries. You cannot say what Judaism can learn from the United States. What Jews can learn from the United States probably is a better question. I think Muslims have to learn a lot of things from the United States. For example, the form of government. I think most Muslim states, particularly in the Middle East, as we are witnessing right now, have very oppressive forms of government. Now, I was saying in some class today that Islam does not prescribe a form of government. This is something that the Quran does not mention, what form of government Muslims should have. It's open, and rightly so, because we don't know what form of government will be good for 3 centuries from now. But I think right now Muslims can learn Muslims can learn from the American form of government, which is a representative government where people can be removed through lawful procedures. You know, what is the problem with Libya? The Libyans cannot remove Gaddafi through a lawful procedure. In the United States, the lawmakers, the governors, the president, city mayors, any person in political authority can be removed. Either after the term has expired or even during the term, he can be recalled. But not so in many Muslim states. So I think if I have to say one thing, Muslims can learn that a representative government is not only good for Americans, it is also good for Muslims.
Do you think it's possible to turn into a more moderate or liberal Islam?
Again, the idea that there is a moderate and liberal Islam, I also reject that. Are there moderate and liberal Muslims? Sure. So I think Islam is a religion, and it has certain characteristics. How do we interpret Islam is the act of the believers. So I think the believers, whether they are Christians or Jews or Muslims or Hindus, like lawyers. I mean, I'm a lawyer. You give me a statute, I can interpret it 2-3 different ways. So I think we do the same thing with divine texts. We read divine texts and we have different interpretations. So yes, Muslims can be liberal or conservative, but Islam, I don't think Islam is liberal or conservative.
Okay. The next question is, I am an atheist, a minority that is suppressed, often brutally, in Muslim societies. What is your attitude toward my right to religious freedom and free speech? Do you agree that I have the right to criticize Islam? Is my speech oppression?
Again, you have no right to criticize Islam because Islam does not say that Muslims should oppress other religious minorities. In fact, the Quran is very clear that there is no compulsion in matters of religion. Chapter 2, verse 255. Go check it. But Muslims, are they oppressive? Sure. Are Muslim governments intolerant? Sure. Are Muslims prejudiced? Sure. Do we need them to change their behavior? Absolutely. So I think there are a lot of things wrong with the Muslims. I would not defend them. And they do horrible things to other religious minorities, and they should stop. But I, as a believer, feel that Islam does not teach me to oppress anyone, let alone, Christians and Jews.
In Missouri, a bill has been introduced into their legislature to outlaw the use of Sharia law in the U.S. courts. Where do they get the idea this would happen?
Well, Oklahoma has already done that. Oklahoma was the first state, and I invited Representative Rex Duncan to have a debate with me before the constitutional amendment was introduced into Oklahoma. It was a constitutional amendment, Oklahoma constitutional amendment. And it was passed by 70% of the vote. 70% of Oklahomans said that Sharia should not be enforced in the Oklahoma courts. Now, what happened? A few days after the amendment was passed, a federal district judge, who happens to be an African-American woman, she said that this constitutional amendment is unconstitutional under the US Constitution. And she gave a stay order to that, and rightfully so. I think the constitutional amendment in Oklahoma does not make sense. For example, the case I mentioned, that the American company wanted Sharia law to be enforced. You know why? Because Sharia does not give you punitive damages. And the American company did not want to be slapped with punitive damages, so they said Sharia law. So don't think that Sharia law is always going to be detrimental to American interests or American companies.
Are we who are here tonight in the House of Islam or in the House of War?
No, there was a distinction made a long time ago in Islamic law that there are either the world of Islam or the world of war. And I think this was a period when most human beings fought with each other and war was legal. In only 1949, nation states agreed that war is illegal. Right now, war is illegal. If you read UN Charter, it says that the use of force or even the threat of the use of force is unlawful. But for centuries, war was a lawful method to promote and protect your interests. So during that time, Islamic jurists or Islamic lawyers said that there are two domains: the domain of Islam, where war is prohibited, and the other domain where the war is allowed. So I don't think that distinction is valid right now. We are in the United States, and it is not a domain of war.
How has the view of Islam changed since 9/11 till the present day?
Islam has not changed. See, one thing that distinguishes Islam from any other religions is that not a single word of the Quran has been changed. Remarkable. For last 14 centuries, it is the same Quran, and of course in Arabic, the same Quran in Arabic, which is being read by millions of people. So I don't think Islam has changed by 9/11. I'm sorry?
Has the view of it changed?
No, I don't think Islam's views have changed. Muslims, I think, particularly in the United States, are frightened after 9/11. That have changed. So I think I'm repeating this, but I want you to make a distinction between Muslims and Islam.
What are your thoughts on the proposal of the mosque at Ground Zero?
I don't know. I think when this thing was waging, I have very confused feelings about the whole issue. As a lawyer, I was saying that Muslims have a right to build this mosque. As a Muslim, I was very uncomfortable with it. Because, and this is me, I'm not saying all Muslims felt like me, this was just me. As a Muslim, as a believer, I thought that this is unnecessary affront to the people who take 9/11 very, very seriously. And I think it was a not wise act to build a mosque over there. I'm still conflicted, I don't know.
This one's a long one. Why don't we fight harder for freedom of opinions in our own societies, a freedom know our needs to be told that, that scarcely exists? Edwards said instead of imposing censorship, I'm sorry, I can't read
That's
it.
okay. Yeah. Is there other question?
Oh, yes, lots.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. It seems as though the First and Fourth Amendments to the U.S. Constitution should be sufficient protection, legally speaking, for American Muslims. What can average citizens do to help make sure Muslims in this country receive their rights under the Constitution?
That's a good question. I think as Americans, we should build the bridges of trust. You know, it's very interesting that when 9/11 happened, I was, of course, in Topeka. A lot of Kansans call the mosque and say, is there any way we can help? I mean, they left messages on the machine of the mosque, the phone machine of the mosque. And we were so happy that instead of, leaving curses on the phone, people were saying, is there anything we can do to make you feel more comfortable? And in fact, a lot of Christians and Jews came to the mosque in order to make sure that we don't feel alienated, we don't feel that, we are under scrutiny or something. I thought that was a very good way to build bridges with Muslims. And Muslims were, very grateful that this was happening. So I think in our individual capacity, and we are powerful as individuals, I believe in that. Don't think that you don't have powers as an individual. You have destructive powers and you have constructive powers. I think I invite you to use your constructive powers to build small bridges between Muslims and other Americans who live together.
Would you also accept the codification of Christian, Jewish, Hindu religious laws? Why are religions above American secular law?
You see, the United States has chosen to separate law from divine texts. That's how I put it. at the public level. At the private level, you don't have to. At the private level, divine texts are alive. They're alive and well. And people are trying to fashion their lives according to the text they believe in. If you ask Jews, they are leading their life, not all of them, but many of them, according to their divine text. So I think the United States legal system is very complex. It is not anti-religion, as the Soviet Union system was. If you compare the Soviet system with the American system, the Soviet system was anti-divine texts. It prohibited the reading of the divine text. It prohibited religion. In the United States, it has separated religion from the secular law. But that doesn't mean that the divine texts are not meaningful to the worshipers or to the believers in the United States. So I think I like this combination, that people are free to fashion their lives according to God's law that they believe in.
You mentioned just violence. How do you justify the violence in the Gaza Strip or the ability to beat your wife as just?
Well, beating your wife is never just. And I think this is one of those things which have been, widely accepted among non-Muslims, that somehow it is lawful for Muslim men to beat their wives. It is not. The short answer is it is not. Muslims are prohibited from physically assaulting anyone, including their family members, particularly their wife. And what was the other part?
You mentioned just violence. How do you justify the violence in the Gaza Strip?
How do you justify violence in Gaza Strip? I don't know what that means. I think the people in Gaza have a right to resist the occupation. If you're saying that, I do believe that they have a right to resist occupation.
Regarding the Mohammed cartoons of 2006, do you support the laws against blasphemy? Do you believe that lack of respect is oppression?
I just mentioned dignity of Islam. I think as decent human beings, we should accept the dignity of religion. Freedom of speech, the First Amendment gives us a lot of rights that we don't have to use. Please understand this point. Every right that law gives you, you don't have to use it. For example, First Amendment gives you the right to hate speech. Why would you do it? Not everything which is permissible is wise. Cannot we make that simple distinction? As a lawyer, as a law professor, I tell you that is a very valid distinction. That law permits a lot of things. Law permits divorce. Why would you divorce? Law permits you to, engage in prejudice. Some kind of prejudice, not complete prejudice. As an employer, probably you can't. But social prejudice, law will permit you. Westboro Church has just won a case from the Supreme Court. Law permits Westboro Church to show their hatred for homosexuals. Is it wise for them to do so? Should they do so? Does law require them to do so? No. So similarly, I would suggest to you that you have the freedom of speech under the First Amendment to challenge the dignity of Islam. Why would you do that? Why would you burn the Quran? Why would you use the toilet paper with the verses of the Quran on it? Why would you wear that T-shirt? Why? Decency would prohibit it, even though the law permits it.
Are persons who embrace Islam by choice treated the same as those who are born Muslim?
Yes. In fact, according to Islamic law, every child is born a Muslim. That's what we believe, that every child is born a Muslim, and then people, some become followers of other religions. So there's no difference if you come back to Islam. So a lot of people who embrace Islam, they don't say they have converted, they say they have reverted to Islam.
How can you say that the Old Testament and New Testament are divine, but you can't agree with some of the things that are in the Old Testament and New Testament?
Yeah, that was a very good question asked even in Professor Janelle's class. I don't only remember her first name. That's a very good question, that how can you believe in the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament and yet not completely agree with it? I'm sorry? Easy. It is easy, yes. I think it is easy. It's easy for all kinds of reasons, but I think Muslims believe that most of the Hebrew Bible and most of the New Testament are still authentic. And therefore, any inconsistency that we find, for example, God is unique, God has no biological, God is not a biological being. If it is inconsistent with the New Testament, then to that extent, we will not believe in the New Testament. So it's like two statutes, Congress passes a statute, and then 10 years later, Congress passes another statute. These two statutes cannot be enforced. So the rule is that the later in time would prevail, to the extent that the later statute is inconsistent with the prior statute. So I think the same is the rule in theology, that the Quran has modified the God's law to some extent, but not wholly.
You mentioned that there are some Sharia laws that can be enforced, but one you mentioned was inheritance that was different than Kansas law. Please expound, as it sounded like you were saying it was enforceable, but how could it be if it does not agree with Kansas law?
That's a very tough question. Not tough in the sense that I can't answer it, but that it would need a lot of explanations and legal background. So I don't think I would venture into that. But believe me, if you come to the law school, I'll tell you how. And by the way, we recruit people from K-State. We love people who graduate from K-State and come to Washburn University School of Law. So if whoever asked this question wants to pursue law, you're welcome.
How do you feel about the profiling in airports?
Profiling on the airports, legally it is fine. I think legally airports do not have as much constitutional protection as within the territory. Is that right, Michael? To large extent, airports and borders, Fourth Amendment there is somewhat not fully enforced. I don't like it. You see, I'm making a distinction between what law does and what we should do and how we react to it. I think I understand that profiling is for security purposes. And I think to that extent, I agree with profiling. But I don't like it because profiling, again, denies individualism, which is one of the traits of American culture, and the one that I like, and one that contributes to the human civilization. I think profiling runs counter to that.
I'm going to say this wrong. Mm-hmm. Timothy McVeigh and other supposed Christian terrorists did not act in the name of religion. Do you not see a self-prescribed group affiliation by individuals that shout
Allahu Akbar, yes.
Akbar, okay, before they kill innocent people?
I don't know that that's a material distinction, what you say before you kill. I don't know what Timothy McVeigh said before he killed. I don't know what Lofner said before he killed. I think that what you say is not important. But if the implication of the question is that it is God that is promoting these people to kill, I would completely disagree. I think that's the argument I made before, that a lot of people think that Islam is inherently violent, that it teaches its followers to kill. I do not agree with that. I think that's totally a false view of Islam.
Constitution law in USA is constructed to protect the property, so does the law in the USA can really address the Muslim?
Well, I think the Constitution of the United States protects a lot of things. It protects freedom of speech, it protects freedom of religion, it protects right to jury trial, it protects property, of course, it protects your due process, it protects you against discrimination. So I don't think that we can say that the US Constitution just protects property. That would be inaccurate description of the US Constitution.
We have 3 more, so I think we can get through them.
Okay.
What is Islam? What does Islam mean for American people and media before 9/11 and after? Do we have old Islam and new Islam? And you kind of answered that.
Yes, I think Islam does not change. Islam is the same. But there are new understandings, new perceptions of Muslims. And I think, but I also appreciate that how Americans bought so many Qurans after 9/11. I think one thing that Americans did, they went to Borders and Barnes and Nobles and said, well, let's read the Quran. And I think many read the Quran, and some still thought that there are passages in the Quran which, if you don't, see them in context, you will come out by saying, this book teaches violence. This book says, kill them wherever you find them. And so I think people have read the Quran, but some still feel that Islam is violent. I don't think it is.
Please explain how the Islamic belief in stealth jihad is not a threat to American religious freedom.
Well, I think jihad, as I said, in fact, right now I'm doing some research on crusades. I have to give a lecture at Creighton University on this topic. And a very fascinating topic, that how in the 11th century, Pope Urban II invited the French knights to come together and fight the Muslims, because Muslims have taken over Christian lands, including Jerusalem. I ask you to read that speech. In fact, according to historians, one of the great speeches delivered in Western Europe in the Middle Ages was by this French Pope, Urban II. The crusade is Christian jihad. Jihad is an Arabic word which means to struggle, to strive, to make an effort. It includes fighting. It's not only, fighting is not the only meaning of jihad. And I was also reading the fatwa of Osama bin Laden that he delivered 900 years after Urban II in 2095. I was surprised that the two speeches are very similar. Urban II, Osama bin Laden, 900 years apart, giving the same speech. Urban II saying, go fight these Muslims because they have taken our holy land. Osama bin Laden saying, go fight these Christians and Jews because they have taken our holy land. So it's a remarkable coincidence that after 900 years, this fight over holy lands does not seem to diminish.
If the newest Holy Scripture is primary i.e. the Quran, supplants the Old and New Testament, does the Book of Mormon supplant the Quran?
Yeah, that's a very good question. For Mormons, it does. I think for the Mormons, it does. But for the Muslims, it does not.
I didn't ask it, but I'm Mormon, so I'll accept that. You say that there is not violence taught in Islam. The Mecca writing speaks well of Jesus and religions. The media, no, the Medina writings, thank you. Okay, let me read that because they won't hear it otherwise. The Medina writings call for jihad, kill the kuffar. If there is no violence in Islam, then where do the imams get their teachings of violence? Thank you.
I don't think you can say that there's no violence in Islam. I think I made this point very clearly. Islam is not a pacifist religion. Islam does not teach its believers peace at all cost or peace under all circumstances. And there is one element of Islam that distinguishes it from other religions and makes it a questionable religion for many. Because if you read the Quran, as I mentioned earlier, it says fighting is better than accepting oppression. So I think a lot of these imams, which means the leaders of Muslim communities, if they are inviting the Muslims to fight, as Osama bin Laden is, then I think they are saying that there is, Muslim communities are under occupation, they are under invasion, and now you don't have to just sit and pray, you have to go and fight. So I think I will not say that Islam is a peaceful religion under all circumstances. That is an inaccurate description of Islam. Islam, in fact, it has been said in poetry that Islam is a breeze if you're in the garden, and it is ferocious when it is falling through the stones of a hill. So it has both characters, that on the one hand, Muslims can be very, very gentle and decent and submissive and grateful, but you change the circumstances and they become ferocious.
To what extent are media spokesmen, example Glenn Beck, and right-wing movements responsible for the current anti-Muslim activity? What strategies are available to counter such threats and protect civil rights?
Yes, I think don't watch Fox. Watch other stations. I don't know. I think Fox and Glenn Beck and Bill O'Reilly, under the laws of the United States, they have a right to say things that they're saying. Should they say things? I don't think so. Do they add to bigotry and prejudice against American Muslims? Yes, they do. And I wish they would stop. But I have no legal means to stop them.
This is the last question. Do you believe the verse of the sword is the word of God? Are those who commit violence in its name Muslims?
Yes. I think the Quran very clearly says that human beings are prone to violence and injustice. And therefore, if they do, and if they oppress you, if they take away your rights, then you have to fight and you have to conquer them. And I think this is the distinguishing factor of the religion of Islam, that its followers believe that God allows them to commit violence under conditions of oppression. I think that's very clear from the Quran. All right, thank you very, very much. I appreciate that.
153. That was great.
How many?
153.
What?
153 in the audience.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was really good.
Sir, Melissa, I am so sorry.